Part 28. All Heaven's Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 271. 269 Old Popsicle. However, the homeless man's reaction was completely different from what Chunyuan thought. He roared angrily, "Get out of here! You rabbit, harmony, lackey!" He rolled over and wanted to pick up the gun. Boom! Chunyuan still had a smile on his face, and maintained the posture of reaching out his hand, but his foot kicked him several meters away. Yi looked amusing, so he walked over and kicked the homeless man onto a table like a ball. Now the homeless man could no longer stand up, and fell to the ground, moaning. In fact, it's not that he's not good, but Chunyuan and Yi are standing in front of him. Needless to say how powerful Yi is as a transformed super soldier. As for Chunyuan, his body has been strengthened several times, and because he can absorb Tiberium's physique, his strength is much stronger than that of ordinary people. It can be said that if the current Chunyuan goes back to fight Huangxian in the silver group at that time, then the winning percentage between him and Huangxian is at least 60-40. You know, now he is only in the bronze group. Therefore, it was not wrong for this homeless man with a dog to be beaten up by him. Seeing his miserable appearance, Chunyuan walked over again, stretched out his hand and said, "I think you may have misunderstood something. Why don't you get up and smoke a cigarette and talk slowly?" The tramp took a look at Chunyuan, and opened his hand with a snap, but there was no hostile action. He just got up with difficulty, and then limped to the side to sit on the steps. Speaking of that dog, the two of them were knocked down one by one when they just started fighting, and then they were trampled under their feet and couldn't move. Now seeing that the two of them stopped fighting, the dog also got up and lay down next to the homeless man, with a wounded self-esteem. Chunyuan walked over and sat side by side with him, and passed a cigarette over. The homeless man moved his butt to keep himself far away from Chunyuan, but he still took the cigarette, took a puff, and then slowly said, "I'm sorry, I forgot that this world has passed 200 years, just now seeing the equipment on your body, I thought you were from the Crimson Dragoon. How do you say, the Yan Kingdom won that war in the end?" "I don't know who won, but from old Hardy's words, it seems that no one won, and they took advantage of the whole world." Chunyuan said flatly, "However, the equipment on my body is either a Crimson Dragon ride, or mine, that's all. Old Hardy, I met an old man running a business at the Red Rocket maintenance station. He is quite a nice guy." The homeless man paused, turned around and stretched out his hand and said, "Nate, an American 200 years ago, participated in Battle of Anchorage, fought against your ancestors." The corner of Chunyuan's mouth twitched, but he still reached out to shake his hand and said, "Chunyuan, a person from Yan Kingdom in another time and space. I think, in another time and space, you should have been killed by me countless times." A moment before starting to shuttle, Lin Huo could react as soon as he heard the name of Fallout 4, telling him not to mess with the homeless man with the dog. That at least shows that this game is quite famous, and in this game, the tramp with the dog is also a very important role. So it's okay for him to say that. But Knight was stunned for a moment, and then he just took a puff of cigarette and smiled wryly. Seeing that he seemed to have something on his mind, Chunyuan asked, "What's wrong? Something happened to you?" "Someone killed my wife, Nora, and took my son, Sean." When Knight said this, his hand holding the cigarette began to tremble. "Alas, I'm sorry." Chunyuan hugged his shoulders and shook, expressing both regret and apology. "After all, I beat up such a sad man just now. Any clues?" he asked. Knight shook his head, "I don't know, I was still in cryogenic sleep at that time. It was, a man in a protective suit, with a bald head, a scar on his face, and a large bore revolver in his hand. A pistol. The bullets are .44 caliber Magnum bullets, and ordinary people cannot handle this kind of gun." Chunyuan looked at his attire again, It was a blue tights, the neckline and chest straps were yellow, and there was also the word 111 in yellow on the back. The tights were obviously made of a very good material, durable and easy to move around, which always reminded him of Superman. In addition, Knight also seemed to realize that the protective ability of this dress was mediocre, so he also found some leather wrist armor and chest guards to protect himself. On his left shoulder, there was originally a shoulder armor welded with scrap iron, but it was deformed during the fight just now and fell to the side. Knight was not interested in picking it up either. On the wrist of his left hand, there is also something like a personal computer. Although it is much bulkier than the similar devices Chen Yuyan saw in science fiction films, it doesn't seem to affect his movements much. It's impossible to find someone just by relying on this information. Do you have any plans? Chen Yuyan asked. I want to find my son Sean. And I want to avenge Nora. Nate's eyes flashed with anger, but then he shook his head in frustration. But I don't even know where to start. This place is so different from 200 years ago. The whole world seems to have been destroyed. My previous home has also been in ruins. I just went to the Red Rocket maintenance station to find some materials to go back 2 days ago, and let Catswall tinkered with the house and finally had a place to live. Yesterday, when I went to the Red Rocket maintenance station, I found this dog. I called it Dog Meat. It was the one that brought me to Concord, but it was already dark and the monsters appeared. That is to say, you have no food, no equipment, and you just settled for a place to live. Chen Yuyan also felt dizzy. He found that this guy's situation was so similar to his own. He thought for a while, then asked again, you always say that you are from 200 years ago, what's going on? A plan, the shelter plan. At that time, I had already retired and returned home, and then the people from the shelter technology came to me and told me that as a veteran, I belonged to a high-quality family, so I was selected to enter the number 111 shelter. And it turned out, I hadn't signed the papers before the United States was nuked. New York and Pennsylvania were the first to be hit, then Washington, D.C. and here, Boston. I immediately took Sean and Nora to shelter 111. The staff told us that we will go into hibernation through freezing technology, and we will return to the ground after the nuclear war is over and the Earth returns to calm. Who knew that such a thing would happen? They opened the freezer and took my son Sean. Killed my wife Nora again. When I returned to the surface, I realized that, 200 years have passed. Knight was shaking as he spoke, and it seemed that whether it was nuclear war or the end of the world, and the pain of the separation of his wife and children, the poor man was pushed to the limit. Chen Yuyan sighed and said, if you go home now, it will be hard for you to accept the situation 200 years ago. Why don't you go to Shizong village with me? All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 272. 270 Sudden Attack. However, Knight looked at Chen Yuyan, shook his head and sighed, sorry, no. Why? There are still more than a dozen families in Shizong village. They just need some protection. We can live there and exchange some food with them. Chen Yuyan asked. Knight still shook his head and said, I'm sorry, I'll continue to live in Sanctuary Hills. And I will live in the room where I was with Nora before, and that will always remind me to find Sean and avenge Nora. In addition, with all due respect, I still can't believe you deep down in my heart. After all, although it has been 200 years, to me, I just came down from the battlefield with Yan Kingdom not long ago. Chen Yuyan looked at the dark sky outside, and said, it's pretty late anyway, just tell me about the war you experienced. I'm quite interested in the war between Yan Kingdom and the United States. Of war never changes. Knight's eyes became darker, and his whole body seemed to have become a lot haggard. This sentence subconsciously spit out, which seemed to be his mantra. He sighed again, tilted his head back, leaned against the handrail of the stairs, and said slowly, "Since I was born, the war has already broken out." But at that time, it was the war between the European Union and the Middle East Resource War. Later, when I was in middle school, Yan Kingdom invaded Alaska and occupied the Anchorage line of defense, and the war broke out. However, just as the long story started, the dog on the side suddenly barked, biting Knight's trouser leg and dragging him outside. "Hey! Dog meat? What are you doing?" Knight was taken aback. "Woof woof." The dog meat just kept barking, and then ran to Yi to wag its tail and stick out its tongue. It is urging us to hurry up. It should have something to bring me here, right? It also wants this beautiful lady to help." Knight said. "You can understand its meaning?" Chen Yuyan was surprised. When I was in the army, we had a few dogs together in the barracks," Knight replied. "Is there still this perverted dog who didn't come to look for me, but ran to pester it and just beat it up?" Chen Yuyan looked at the dog meat with contempt. Knight smiled and said, "Is this lady called Yi? It's Chinese, I know a little bit. If you say it in English, it's Wang, Wang." He hadn't finished his second Wang character when he was already downstairs. Bang, the sound of a heavy object falling outside the window with a hole in it. Chen Yuyan maintained the kicking posture, and said to Yi, "Remember, Yi, who dares to call you in English in the future, you do like me." "Okay, Dad." Yi replied obediently. Goro led the way, and Chen Yuyan and the others followed behind. Nat was kicked down from the second floor by Chen Yuyan and sprained his ankle. He took out a syringe and gave his foot an injection, and soon recovered a lot. Walter told Chen Yuyan that it was the therapeutic needle. If he could take one back, more, who was injured by the gun before, would be saved. In fact, Chen Yuyan has a lot of first aid sprays in his personal space, but he didn't use them before. Because if those villagers saw these things, they might be very sensitive to connect him with that college again. However, it seems that the healing needles are better than the first aid spray, especially in treating internal injuries. If you have a chance, you must scan it, and the personal terminal on Knight's wrist is also a thing that makes Chen Yuyan quite envious. But from Knight's point of view, Chen Yuyan and Yi surprised him even more. Not to mention the very advanced combat uniforms on their bodies. The light blue light emitted from the eyepieces of the gas masks indicated that they had night vision functions. And M41 a one-pulse rifle. The terrifying power made Knight's eyelids twitch wildly. "Gauze rifle. You really have something to do with the Yan Kingdom's army," Knight said in a deep voice. Chen Yuyan had just headshot the two ghouls rushing towards him, and almost spit out a mouthful of old blood when he heard these words. "What do you mean by you old popsicle that has been frozen for 200 years? Anything could be related to that war? Can we still play together?" He rolled his eyes and turned around and said, "Okay, why does this pulse rifle have something to do with Yan Kingdom again?" Yan Guo's army is equipped with a large number of gauze rifles, which is why they can compete with the American army equipped with power armor. Knight said, "You can see that they are from Yan Guo, and the style of their combat uniforms is also the same. The Crimson Dragoon's Nigger combat uniform is very similar, and the weapon used is also a gauze rifle." Chen Yuyan noticed that when he said Black Ghost in combat uniform, he pronounced it in Chinese pinyin, which is very interesting. He rubbed his forehead and said, "Then let me tell you what I think. If you use this kind of thing again to set me up with a black and white camp, I will see you beat me up every time. No matter what. Are you a tramp with a dog?" "Okay." Knight turned his head to look to the other side, and stopped talking, but obviously he was also super upset. Dog meat is obviously a dog with a very high IQ. At least Knight didn't urge him to come out when he was driven into the house by the ghoul to hide. And after seeing that Chen Yuyan and Yi, who were super powerful in combat, seemed to have no conflict with Knight, They started barking for them to come here to help together. Under its leadership, a group of people passed through the town, killed at least 100 ghouls along the way, and came to a 5-story building with a large area. There is also a sign of Freedom Museum on this building. Is it a museum? I only saw at least 20 corpses lying in a haphazard manner in front of the museum, including ghouls and humans. Moreover, those human corpses were obviously divided into 2 different types of people. One was wearing armor welded with iron scraps, tattoos were everywhere on the body, and the appearance was hideous. The other group of people wore beige uniforms, walkie-talkies on their chests, and very retro felt hats with large brims. It turns out that the gunshots I heard came from here. 2 groups of people were exchanging fire. I just don't know where the dog meat was sent to find rescue. Chun Yuyan said. Dog meat showed its camp with actions. It walked over and sniffed the corpses in beige uniforms with its nose, and let out a sad whimper. It seems that Goro wants us to go in. Let's go, be careful. Knight had just spoken halfway, and suddenly shouted. But Chun Yuyan's reaction was one step faster than his, kicking Walter away with one kick, and at the same time, he and Yi quickly dodged to hide behind several concrete barricades. Almost at the same time, shhhhhh. There was a burst of intensive gunfire, and a large number of bullets hit the concrete. The penetrating power of these bullets is not strong, and they cannot penetrate the concrete barricade at all. Chun Yuyan leaned against the back of the road and took out a Scorpion Type I assault rifle, which he asked the Infinite Base to manufacture when he was chatting with Knight earlier. He slid the assault rifle on the ground and stopped right next to Knight, and threw a few magazines over and said, "You take Walter in first. Yi and I will take care of the people outside." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 273. 271 War Predators. Knight was also polite, knocked open the door with a bang, and rolled in, followed by a series of gunshots and scolding, obviously encountering resistance. But Chun Yuyan wasn't worried about him at all. Lin Huo's growl before leaving, "Don't offend the tramp with the dog," it meant too much. Why is it not an organization or a prestigious name? The meaning contained in it has already been clearly expressed to a large extent. That is to say, this unassuming guy may have the power to overturn the entire game. Looking back, he saw that Walter hadn't gone in yet. He had been hiding behind the bunker, obviously stunned by the sudden attack from outside. Chun Yuyan turned around and shouted loudly, "Walter! Get in quickly! The situation outside is complicated, and you will die faster." "Yes, yes." Walter was still a little hesitant at first, but when he heard Chun Yuyan say dead words, he immediately became ruthless. He raised the Scorpion assault rifle over the bunker and fired indiscriminately, then ducked into the Liberty Museum. Chun Yuyan looked back at Yi again. She was also leaning against the concrete barricade, holding guns in both hands and looking eager to try. He nodded at Yi, and Yi immediately understood. Chun Yuyan gestured 3, 2, 1, then activated the electromagnetic bulletproof module of the combat uniform, flashed out of the cover and rushed out from the left in an instant. And Yi also activated the bulletproof module and rushed out from the right. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. The muzzle of the M41A1 pulse rifle flashed with dazzling electric light, and countless 10mm caliber caseless bullets shot out. With the help of the night vision device, Chun Yuyan locked on at least 5 firepower points the moment he rushed out of the bunker. They are all hidden behind the windows of several buildings on the street, the group of people in scrap armor, with mohawk hair, and graffiti-like tattoos all over their bodies. They looked crazy, holding all kinds of weapons and shooting wildly towards the side. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. SHHHHHHHHHHH. Among the dense bullets, there are actually a few beams of red lasers mixed in. The whistling sound should be the sound of energy compression when the laser gun is fired. However, although the opponent's bullets were powerful, Chen Yuyan soon realized that he had overestimated them. The number of bullets from this group of people could fall on him no more than a slap, and the laser gun didn't even hit a single shot. No matter how you point the laser and pull the trigger, it will hit, but what's the use if you can't aim correctly? Chen Yuyan shot back while moving irregularly. With the power of the pulse rifle, there was no need to aim at the parts of those people exposed outside the bunker. Directly hit in the general direction, the strong penetrating power can penetrate even a 10 centimeters thick concrete shear wall. After a few screams, several of the predators facing Chen Yuyan were killed. But Yi's firepower was more precise. Chen Yuyan ran wildly along the street, and dead bodies kept falling from his head. Almost all of them were shot without missing a beat. "They're coming. Shoot!" There was an exasperated shout from the front, and these people began to gather, concentrating their firepower to stop it. Chen Yuyan and Yi were indeed blocked temporarily. The opponent's laser gun was too threatening, and the electromagnetic bulletproof module on the combat uniform had no effect on the laser. Chen Yuyan was hit by a laser, and a piece of the combat uniform was burnt black. Only then did he discover that the laser guns used by these people seemed to be exactly the same as the low-power laser guns equipped on the protector-type guard robots. They are all red laser beams, and they make an unpleasant sound when fired, as if a piece of something has been scorched. Seeing that the two of them were temporarily blocked, the group became arrogant again. Their firepower poured desperately towards the side, and several earth-made grenades were thrown over. This formation is not like fighting two people, but fighting 200 people. This earthen grenade Chen Yuyan didn't dare to calculate the detonation time like the standard grenade and then throw it back. He hurriedly smashed his shoulder through the wall of a nearby building and rushed in. There are more people on the other side than he imagined, at least 30 to 40 people, so it is not a good idea to shoot at each other on the street. They only need to shoot randomly in a general direction to suppress themselves. Chen Yuyan looked around. This was a bar, and on the rotten bar counter were a few corpses that had turned into skeletons. There were also a few scattered people here, and Chen Yuyan easily killed them, and after determining a general direction, he ran up to the second floor and walked forward quickly. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. The sound of gunfire outside the door was still heard, and there was also a fierce exchange of fire on Yi's side. After Chen Yuyan hid in the building, those people also lost their target, running around like headless chickens in the dark night. He condescendingly shot and killed several people, and the rest did not dare to show their heads and hid in the building. But then there were a few screams, but they chased them in one by one. In such a dark and narrow building, Yi is extremely deadly. To be honest, Chen Yuyan doesn't know how powerful Yi is now, and he is not willing to let Yi take risks. But what is certain is that her strength is growing rapidly every day. Chen Yuyan continued to climb up to the third floor. Under the inspection of the night vision device, the vision here is better. Seeing that ghouls have been attracted around, the remaining marauders began to run towards a basement at the end of the street. He raised his gun and shot a few shots to kill the scattered ghouls around, and greeted one by one in the communicator, telling her not to act rashly. When they went down to the street, Chen Yuyan checked around. This was a bar, called Concord Speakeasy. However, no other entrances and exits were found. He frowned. There were still 7 or 8 people left on the other side, and I don't know how many people were in the bar. It would be really troublesome if they all guarded at the door and concentrated their firepower. Yi, you stay here and watch. I'll dig through the corpses to see if I can find some grenades. Chen Yuyan ordered. Father, I can attack and kill them. Yi said. Chen Yuyan smiled, walked over and patted her head. Okay, don't take risks. Wait until I find a few grenades, and then Dad will go down with you. Yeah. Yi nodded obediently. Chen walked towards the direction he came from, only then did he realize that he and Yi were chasing and killing, unknowingly killing 2 streets away. He came to a corpse, knelt down and said silently in his mind, "Collect biomass." A ray of blue light shone down, and the body of the corpse immediately melted away, and soon disappeared without a trace, leaving only the clothes and equipment on the body, and even the blood was collected. It was only then that Chen discovered that this function seemed to be able to be used for cleaning. I searched a few times in the clothes at random, except for some scattered bullets and sundries, there were no grenades. So he went on to find other corpses. On the way, he also found a few laser pistols, which he scanned into the Infinite Base database without hesitation. This kind of laser pistol is not very powerful, and in the Infinite Base database, it is only a level 1 product, not very advanced. At this moment, a soft sound suddenly came from the nearby building. Chen Yuyan's eyes sharpened instantly, and he stepped into the building, looked at a large wardrobe in the corner, and a sneer appeared on the corner of his mouth. "Thank you for the reward of 10,000 starting coins from Star Sea Rangers. The first leader of this book was born. Thank you Star Sea Rangers for their continuous support since the book was opened, which gave me the confidence to continue writing this book. Don't say anything, let's make 5 changes today." All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 274. 272 Misty Grass Nima has death claws. Bang. The closet was kicked into pieces by Chen Yuyan. A young predator was hiding in it. When he saw Chen Yuyan, he yelled in fear, "Don't kill me! Don't kill me!" Chen Yuyan grabbed him by the neckline and threw him outside on the street. With a slap, he slapped his face and asked coldly, "Who are you? Why are you here? Who is your leader?" Our boss called Gresto, he said he was going to catch an old woman," the man replied tremblingly. "Gresto? Where is he?" Chen Yuyan continued to ask. "It's in the underground tavern in front." The man pointed to the front. "Is there another entrance and exit there?" Chen Yuyan slapped him again. Yes. Behind is the sewer, which has collapsed a lot, but there is still a maintenance passage to enter the back door of the bar." But there are ghouls inside, Gresto asked us to seal the back door." "Okay, take me there." Chen Yuyan hadn't finished speaking when he suddenly heard a loud bang behind him. He hurriedly turned his head, only to see a huge figure coming out of the ground. Ah! There was an extremely terrifying howl. The predator next to him was so frightened that he shit and pissed, pointing at the monster and screaming, "Death Claw! Death Claw! Wow! Death Claw! What the hell?" Chen Yuyan took a closer look, only to see a huge monster at least 3 meters high standing up from the ground. This monster is covered with carapace and scales, as if wearing armor. The anti-jointed legs are extremely thick, supporting the whole body. On the whole, it is like an enlarged version of Hunter Alpha, which retains a lot of characteristics of lizards, but the monster in front of it is obviously more ferocious and terrifying. Its limbs are stronger, and its long claws have the power to easily break through the steel plate. Compared with the hunter, there is almost no fat accumulation on its body, and it is completely terrible muscles. What's even more hideous is that there are sharp barbs growing on its joints and back, and long curved horns growing on its head. In Chen Yuyan's poor game knowledge, he actually found something similar to this monster, Diablo. "Bastard, Yi! Run!" Chen Yuyan yelled, kicked the predator next to him unconscious, and rushed towards the death claw. But then there was a burst of gunfire over there. "I can handle it. Dad." Yi's voice came from the communication, and her words were covered by a series of gunshots. Chen Yuyan ran over without stopping, only to see that Yi was already fighting this monster. Her figure is very flexible, and this monster can't touch the corner of her clothes at all. Roar! Deathclaw roared, and grabbed it with one claw, and the wreckage of a car next to it was cut into two pieces by its claws like tofu. One can imagine what would happen if it was caught on a human body. But Yi dodged the blow with a beautiful rollover, and he was already shooting in mid-air. Da-da-da-da. All the bullets fired from the pulse rifle hit one of Deathclaw's feet, and it staggered suddenly. At the same time, Yi had landed on the ground, twisted her slender waist, and kicked a concrete block with a diameter of at least 1 meter into the face of Deathclaw with a thud. The Deathclaw roared loudly, and the two claws grabbed it frantically. Click. Catch the ground and leave deep scratches up to 1 meter long on the asphalt. Click. Caught on the wall, the entire wall of the nearby building was smashed into countless broken bricks and stones and collapsed. Yi dodged left and right, barely avoiding Deathclaw's claws every time. Obviously her judgment of distance has reached a level of meticulousness. The M4101 pulse rifle in his hand also fired rhythmically, and the powerful bullets left countless wounds on Deathclaw's body. Although the strength of Deathclaw's body is appalling, the pulse rifle used by Chunyuan fires 10mm caliber caseless bullets, which can easily penetrate the armor of armored vehicles. Many of the ultra-high-speed bullets even hit Deathclaw directly. Where? The continuous injuries made the Deathclaw go crazy. It roared loudly, and the sound was extremely terrifying, as if it was really a demon coming to the world. Its scarlet eyes fixed on Yi, then suddenly lowered its head, with the long horns on its head pointing forward, charging up like a bull fighting bull. While charging, it opened its two claws, directly covering a range of 4 or 5 meters around. As long as it is within this range, the only three options are to be bitten to death by it, crushed to death, or shredded. But at this time, Chunyuan saw a bloodthirsty smile appearing on the corner of Yi's mouth, exactly the same as when he attacked Junkrat Gang's lair before. Yi! Don't do this, come back! Chunyuan yelled, but it was a step too late. All I saw was that Yi was heading straight for Deathclaw. Every step of her foot contains a powerful force, leaving deep footprints on the ground. Crazy light appeared in Deathclaw's eyes, and the claws shone coldly under the reflection of the firelight. The bloody mouth was already open, and bloody pieces of meat were still stained between the dense fangs. It lowered its head and ran faster and faster. The long horns on the top of its head can undoubtedly demolish a house with ease. Step. 2 steps. Walk. Yi was also accumulating powerful strength, his feet exploded with a bang, and his whole body rose into the air. That small fist hit Deathclaw's forehead like a bullet. Boom. A shock wave spread out instantly, blowing away the surrounding dust, forming a wave of air visible to the naked eye. Under the powerful impact, Yi flew backwards and crashed into a house with a bang. And Deathclaw was also knocked to the ground by this punch. The 3-meter-high body was knocked down by a hard punch while running at full speed. One can imagine the power of Yi's punch. 1-1. Chunyuan yelled loudly, but before he could finish speaking, the building exploded, and countless rubble flew everywhere. Immediately afterwards, a beautiful shadow rushed out of it like lightning, and Yi was unscathed except for her dirty clothes. On the contrary, there was an extremely excited look in her eyes. As soon as Deathclaw stood up from the ground, Yi kicked him hard in the face. Before he could recover, Yi hit his weak spot with a whip kick. Ah! Deathclaw roared, stepped back several steps, and finally fell to the ground without standing still. Yi stepped forward, her posture was extremely graceful, like an invincible goddess on the battlefield. She picked up the M4101 pulse rifle that had just dropped from the ground, aimed at the Deathclaw that fell on the ground, and directly crushed the trigger to death. Da-da-da-da. Dozens of bullets poured out, shooting countless bloody flowers on Deathclaw's body. Deathclaw struggled to get up, but Yi had already walked up to it, and kicked it again. Put on a fresh magazine and fire again. Da-da-da-da-da. The lightning from the muzzle pierced the night sky continuously, and also illuminated Yi-Yi's cold and beautiful face. In front of her, it seemed that the world was paled by it. All Heaven's Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 275. 273 Power Armor. Hiss. The hissing sound from Deathclaw's mouth became smaller and smaller, and the struggle became weaker and weaker, and finally there was no movement at all. Only then did Yi-Yi stand up, and now her body was also splattered with the blood from Deathclaw, but she didn't care. She just happily ran to Chen, pointed at the corpse of Deathclaw happily. "Father! Get rid of it!" Chen let out a long breath. On the one hand, he was finally relieved, and on the other hand, he found that he might not be able to beat Yi-Yi. Although she used a pulse rifle, she basically killed Deathclaw with her bare hands. "If I did it, it would be a big embarrassment." "Father! Reward." The corners of Yi-Yi's mouth curved, revealing her white teeth, and she smiled innocently. She spread her palms towards Chen. Chen purposely raised his face and said, "Don't be so reckless in the future. Yi-Yi. Such a dangerous enemy, wouldn't it be over if you give Dad a punch to death? Anyway, bragging doesn't cost money," and Chen began to talk nonsense. Yi-Yi pouted, "But I think I can kill it." Chen rubbed her hair, and said softly, "Okay. Yi-Yi did a great job this time. Come, I'll give you a reward." He took out a glass bottle filled with liquid tiberium from his personal space and handed it over. Yi-Yi happily took the bottle, put one hand on his hips, brought the bottle to his lips, raised his head and drank all the liquid tiberium boldly. Thank you, Dad." Satisfied, Yi-Yi jumped up and hugged Chen neck, rubbing hard on his face. "Okay, I caught someone alive just now. He said that there is a sewer that leads to the back door of the underground bar. Let's go over there and kill all the predators inside," Chen said. Boom. The two were chatting. Suddenly there was a loud noise behind them, and then a searchlight light came over. Chen and Yi dodged and hid in the corner for a moment, looking over there carefully. Boom. 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 There was a sound of heavy footsteps, and a huge human figure walked over, and the light seemed to be on his forehead. "Yan. Yi. Where are you?" A voice came through the loudspeaker. "It's Night." Chen understood the identity of the visitor, and Night seemed to have learned his lesson. This time he didn't address Yi in English. "Here." Chen went out and waved his hands and said, when he came to the front, he saw a steel giant standing in front of him. At least 2 meters high, the whole body is covered by steel armor, with sharp edges and corners, full of the atmosphere of the industrial age. There is a square cooling system on the chest, which can also provide better defense. The helmet of the armor looks like a metal full coverage gas mask. 2 ventilation pipes extend from both sides of the ventilator at the front mouth to the backpack. It's just that the armor on his body is already rusted, and it's thankful that he can move. In his hand, he held a 6-barreled machine gun with a drum feed. This large firearm that ordinary people could not handle was just right in Knight's hands. "What kind of equipment is this on you?" Chen was very interested in his body. T-45. A power armor is the most primitive model. It has been eliminated for several years when I was a soldier in Anchorage. But now it is just right to deal with those predators. Knight replied. He looked around, the searchlight on the top of the helmet swept around, there were corpses of predators all over the place, and there was that terrifying Deathclaw corpse on the ground. Although he didn't know what the Deathclaw was, the extremely impactful shape already showed how terrifying it was. Knight couldn't help being a little surprised. "You two did all of this?" Chen waved his hands indifferently and said, "It doesn't matter, it's just a normal operation. It just so happens that you are thick-skinned now, so go ahead. The rest of the predators are in the underground bar. He pointed to the entrance of the bar. Leave it to me. Knight, who also wanted to do something, agreed without saying a word. He picked up the 6-barreled machine gun and walked down the stairs, kicking the bar door to pieces. Almost at the same time, there was a roar in the bar, followed by a burst of dense bullets, all hitting Knight's T-45 power armor with a bang. A few more grenades rolled over, boom. Boom. There was an explosion. Chen Yuyan's eyelids twitched. If he had rushed straight down then, this would be the one that greeted him. However, the power armor remained motionless. Even if the grenade exploded at his feet, he was completely fearless. He just swayed and continued to move forward, with an unstoppable momentum. Wu, the 6-barreled machine gun in Knight's hand, warmed up for a few seconds and immediately spewed out a long tongue of flame, and countless bullets poured out immediately, covering the small space in the entire bar. All covered. The decaying tables and chairs in the bar counter, and the empty wine bottles in the wine cabinet were smashed to pieces, and the predators hidden inside were also smashed to pieces by countless bullets. Smoke, debris, and blood mist sprayed everywhere. It's like a picture of hell on earth. Knight emptied the 200-round ammunition drum, threw away the red 6-barreled machine gun with a bang, grabbed a gun from the ground, and went forward while shooting. Seeing that he had almost killed all the predators inside, Chen Yuyan and Yi also rushed in, calling and killing the frightened predators one by one. When Knight faced the enemy, he was completely ruthless, without any hesitation at all, just killing. And Chen Yuyan also stared at this power armor for a while. Didn't he mean to find a way to fight against General Tailong and Lu Weiwei? Isn't this the one in front of you? The problem he faces now is that in the red zone over the mining area, B.O.W cannot be deployed, and it will take a lot of time for the armored force to take shape, and personnel training is also a problem. And if this kind of individual power armor is added, the army against General Tailong will have great confidence. At this time, a panicked shout came from a compartment deep in the bar, "Stop hitting! Stop hitting! I surrender! I surrender! You guys go, this armor is useless," Knight said in a low voice. Chen Yuyan nodded, walked up with Yi, and kicked open the door with a bang. All I saw was a big man wearing heavy mechanical armor and with a broom-like mohawk walking out with his hands raised, yelling, "I surrender! I surrender! Put down the gun!" Chen Yuyan said flatly, and the other party threw the gun out without hesitation. "Who are you?" "I'm Gresto," the man replied simply. "You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 276. 274 Fusion Core. Chen Yuyan walked over and grabbed the mohawk head on Gresto's head, dragged him out and threw him on the ground amidst his screams. At this time, Knight also turned on the power armor switch. All I could see was the armor pieces on the back of the power armor unfolding towards the surroundings, revealing a space just enough to accommodate a person. Knight also came out from inside, only to see that he was steaming and sweating profusely, and kept screaming, "I'm scalding to death! I'm scalding to death! What's your situation? Why did you cook it?" Chen Yuyan asked. Knight picked up a piece of wood on the ground as a fan and fanned it vigorously, but the wood was broken with a loud click. He threw the wood chip away very depressed, shook his head and said, T-45 is the first generation of power armor, basically made of pure steel. The heat dissipation effect is very poor, and large caliber machine gun bullets can penetrate. This T-45 should have been replaced from the front line troops and sent to Canada for suppression missions. Canada? Suppression? Chen Yuyan was a little surprised. Knight said with a wry smile, "Yes, repression. After the war began, the United States occupied Canada as the rear resource production area of the Anchorage battle. Okay, let's talk about this later. Chen Yuyan walked over and touched the power armor, feeling very hot, and saw signs of deformation in several places where the outer armor was hit by laser guns. This kind of armor poor resistance to energy weapons. That's right. At that time, there were not many energy weapons in Yan Kingdom, and most of them were equipped with gauze rifles, so they didn't think much about energy weapons. At that time, American politicians were crazy. They sent 100 many T-45 power armor soldiers went to raid Xizang, but none of them came back. A classmate of mine from the military academy was also there, nightside. There was a muffled bang from the side. It turned out that Gresto wanted to take the opportunity to escape, but was kicked one by one and stuck to the wall. Chen Yuyan came to the power armor and raised his hand to touch it, but the system reminded that there were people from other camps around him. So he told Nat to rest on the other side, which Nat did, although he was confused. Scan again. After scanning, the data completion rate of T-45 a power armor is 58%, and the data can only be added to the database after the data is complete. He knocked on the shell of the power armor again. The sound was very low, and the armor seemed to be quite thick. From what you said, there are follow-up products of this type of power armor? There are quite a few, but the most equipped is the T-51B type, which is also the kind of power armor that is truly suitable for the battlefield. Only after it is put into battle can we be able to drive the Yan Kingdom's invading troops from Alaska. Knight replied. Then, what are they powered by? Diesel. Hee, diesel engines can't provide energy with a power of more than 60,000 watts. Knight walked over, pulled out a small thing about 10 centimeters long and 5 centimeters thick from the back of the T-45 a power armor, and said, the power is this nuclear fusion core. Just such a thing can provide a factory with a year of electricity. Chen Yuyan's eyes lit up. He took the fusion core, which was still hot, and walked aside to start scanning. Scanning is complete. The nuclear fusion core has been entered into the infinite base database and can be manufactured. Fusion core. Manufacturing conditions, Level 3, Manufacturing Center. Manufacturing resources, 0.8 kilograms of metal, 1 kilogram of medium purity refined tiberium. Manufacturing time, 10 minutes. Function, the use of miniature nuclear fusion reactors to provide almost unlimited energy supply is the ultimate answer to the shortage of resources. The invention that could have stopped the war that broke out because of resources was used by the Americans to further expand the war. Damn it! Wait a minute, what's the situation with medium purity tiberium refining? Chen Yuyan asked in his mind. Liquid tiberium with a refining purity of 50% to 70% is called medium purity refined tiberium, and requires a level 2 refinery to produce it. However, the unknown alien building in the Nuwa base can extract a small amount of refined tiberium with a purity of up to 99%, which can meet the manufacturing needs. Only then did Chen Yuyan heave a sigh of relief. At least he is still capable of producing medium purity refined tiberium. A nuclear fusion core only needs 1 kilogram of medium purity refined tiberium, which is not too much. Judging from the current size of the ruined army, it can fully meet the needs of power armor. Moreover, this NEMA is a micronuclear fusion technology. With this kind of thing, he can freely equip all powerful weapons that require a lot of energy. For example, the basic electromagnetic gun, you have to lie down for 5 shots, but if you use the nuclear fusion core to power it, you can fire at least hundreds of times in a row. This world is simply a treasure. Unlike Chen Yuyan, who was full of frustration a day later and felt that the world had nothing but population, if anyone told him that the world of Fallout 4 was rubbish, he would be the first to kill that person. Only then did he think of Gresto. He walked over and knocked the predator who had been shot one by one off the wall, woke him up with a slap, and asked, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" My name is Gresto. Before he finished speaking, Chunyuan slapped him again and slapped one of his front teeth off. You said it just now. I, Jared sent me to bring people over to ambush some volunteers. He said that these volunteers are protecting some civilians. There is an old woman inside, and we must bring her back alive. Gresto said quickly. Old woman? Did he mean Murphy's mother? Knight came over and asked. That's right, it's Murphy. Gresto nodded quickly. Have you met them? Chunyuan asked Knight. Knight nodded and replied, yes, they were led by a black man named Preston Garvey, and there were about a dozen others. When I found them, they were hiding upstairs in the Liberty Museum, trying to put this machine on the ground. Power armor activated. Chunyuan looked at Gresto and asked, why are you arresting an old lady like Murphy? Our boss, Jared, has gone crazy. He insisted that taking more crazy drugs would open his eyes, and he made himself crazy. Then he said that this old woman has eyes, and asked me to tie her back. Grace Tom quickly answered. Sky Eye? Chunyuan glanced at Knight suspiciously. Knight spread his hands and shrugged. Mother Murphy is indeed a bit mysterious. Then where is the Jared you mentioned? Chunyuan asked. It's at our base, Wuxia assembly plant. I know where it is. It's a little far away. On the edge of Lexington town, it used to produce some mechanical parts. It's a pretty big factory. Knight said. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 277. 275, 64K Black Technology. While speaking, Knight raised the personal terminal on his wrist, opened a map on it, and marked a place southeast of Concord. He showed the map to Chunyuan. It's about 30 kilometers. Note 1, and you need to prepare well before you can go there. By the way, you plan to take it there, right? How many of you are there? Chunyuan continued to ask Gresto. I said everything. Don't kill me, don't kill me, Jared is a lunatic, I will never go back. I will follow you, follow you. Gresto felt something was wrong. Hurry up and beg for mercy loudly. Knight said, it's all right, go ahead. I won't kill you, as long as you don't go back. Jared currently has more than 200 people. Note 2, because the factory has a large space and is surrounded by barbed wire protection, so he is considered a bully near Lexington. Gresto said quickly, all I know is these, you can let me go. Let's go. Before Nat finished his sentence, there was a bang, and Gresto's head exploded like a watermelon. Knight immediately glared at Chunyuan. What are you doing? I promised not to kill him. That's what you promised, but I didn't. Chunyuan replied, and then added, you haven't seen what these predators do, if you had, you wouldn't say that. He glanced at Knight, who had calmed down slightly, and said, when I was heading here, I passed the ruins of a village. The entire village was plowed to the ground by looters, and the villagers were driven into a house by them. All men, women, and children were randomly shot to death. He paused again, and then said, it is not easy to survive in this last world. Those who still choose to become robbers will not have a few lives in their hands. If you kill, you will kill. There is nothing to hesitate. For example, if someone has the ability, if you kill me, I won't have any complaints. Yi will never let anyone hurt Dad. Yi said loudly, waving a small pink fist beside him, seemingly without any deterrent effect. However, Chunyuan, who had seen her punch the death claws that were running at full speed, knew the weight of her words. This is definitely going to kill someone. Knight thought for a while, and accepted Chunyuan's statement. After all, he was also a veteran who had been on the real front, and death was commonplace for such a man. The reason why he got angry just now was more because of the righteousness in his heart. Now that he calmed down and thought about it, it was indeed the case. For these predators, one counted as one, and they were all killed. There was absolutely no one who was wronged. But Chen Yuyan kept staring at the personal terminal on his wrist, and asked, "What is this thing on your wrist?" Knight said, "This, Pip-Boy, I picked it up in the shelter. It's a very useful thing. If I have a chance, I'll take you to the shelter to see if there are more. Can you show me?" Chen Yuyan asked for it, and he naturally wanted to scan it. Knight frowned, hesitating a little, and it was obvious that he really liked this thing. However, he thought that Chen Yuyan had given him a brand new assault rifle without saying a word, so he was relieved and untied the Beep Boy and handed it to Chen Yuyan. Chen Yuyan took the Beep Boy and walked to the side. Seeing this, Knight wanted to follow, but was stopped by Yi, who said coldly, "Dad doesn't want you to come close at this time." With the beauty in front, Knight couldn't say anything. Sometimes beauty is a curse, but it's also a privilege. The scan is complete, and the Beep Boy has been added to the Infinite Base database and can be built. Beep Boy. Construction conditions, Level 4, Manufacturing Center. Construction resources, 0.5 kilograms of metal, 5 kilograms of medium purity refined tiberium ore. Build time, 80 minutes. Functions, physical health status scanning, universal data interface, hacking tools, assisted aiming combat system, radio, personal computer, item management, map navigation, game console, etc., all of which can be realized with only 64K memory. Remarks, it can be connected with the combat uniform or the Red Queen, which will play a more powerful role. Chen Yuyan's eyes are shining. Damn it, this thing is so awesome that it explodes. It is completely a universal personal terminal. Can do anything. And, what's the situation with only 64K of memory? Chen Yuyan almost thought he had heard wrong. This thing? So many functions. 64K RAM? Just a random computer has more than a dozen gigabytes of memory. Even for smartphones, the memory has begun to be calculated in G. 64K? Equivalent to more than 65,000 English letters, that's all. This is completely black technology. The kind that is completely incomprehensible. But do you need a level 4 manufacturing center? Chen Yuyan sighed secretly, almost wanted to kill Knight, and then snatched the Beep Boy over. But he still walked over and returned the Pip Boy to Knight. This thing is simply too powerful. I have never seen such a powerful personal terminal. Seeing that Chen Yuyan had returned the BB, Knight's sense of him improved a lot, and he put the Pip Boy back on his left wrist and said, let's go to the Liberty Museum. Preston and the others are still waiting for our good news. Woolen cloth. Chen Yuyan nodded, and Knight walked over to re-enter the T-45 of power armor, and led them all the way back to the Freedom Museum. Entering the museum, Chen Yuyan saw that it turned out to be a museum of the American Revolutionary War. It is divided into several halls, and the historical events from the Boston Tea Party, to the gunshots in Lexington, to the release of the Declaration of Independence, the defeat of Britain, and the independence of the United States were restored with dummies. Of course, after 200 years of erosion and wind and rain, the place has long been dilapidated, the dummies and sets are also scattered, and the automatic commentary is also intermittent. But being able to reach this level is already very powerful. All products in this world are durable and of high quality. Thinking of this, Chen Yuyan suddenly remembered that the protector-type guard robot, the technology he got in the lottery before, could operate freely even in the ion storm. At that time, I talked about it with Lin Huo, and Lin Huo casually said that this is a robot from the radiation world, and of course it is durable. At that time, Chen Yuyan didn't take it seriously, and let it pass. Now that I think about it, it turns out that the protector robot is a product of this world. No wonder power armor can still be opened after 200 years of wind and Sunday. It seems that this is a routine operation in this world. All the way up the stairs, they came to the door of a room, only to see a black man in a beige uniform greet him, and said in a slightly magnetic voice, "Hello, you are Mr. Chinhuyan. I represent the volunteer army, thank you for your help. But next, we still have a lot to do." Chinhuyan suddenly shuddered for no reason. "Why? This guy doesn't look too good, does he? Is it the cold weather?" Note 1, let me give you a general idea. Without traffic jams, it takes about 30 minutes to drive from Lexington to downtown Boston, and the distance is more than 40 kilometers. It is similar from Lexington to Concord. Distance. In addition, the population of Concord is more than 6,000, the population of Lexington is more than 30,000, and the population of downtown Boston is 590,000. It is not just a few broken houses in the game. The reason why I say this specifically is that I hope that in the following content, everyone can have a new understanding of this area, and don't judge it by the distance in the game. Note 2, let's zoom in on the same scale. In the game, there are already a lot of people in the Wuxia assembly factory. There are 43 predators in total. Very suitable. For similar plots in the future, it is enough for everyone to understand what is going on. The 5th watch has been reached. I'm so good, I didn't work at work today, haha. Thanks again to the leader of the Star Sea Rangers, thank you for your support. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 278. 276 Volunteer Army. However, out of politeness, Chinhuyan shook hands with him with a smile and said, "I just passed by Concord by chance. When I encountered these predators doing evil, it is naturally my duty to eliminate them." Unexpectedly, as soon as he said the words duty to shirk, a bright light burst out from the eyes of the black man in front of him. He held Chinhuyan's hand with both hands, and said excitedly, "It is true that there are still people like you and Mr. Knight in the Federation, that's great. The Federation still has a future." Seeing his enthusiastic reaction, Chinhuyan began to reflect on whether he had said something wrong, but what else could he do if everyone else said that? Chinhuyan smiled and said, "It's okay, it's best if I can help you. By the way, what did you say you were? Volunteer Army?" Preston Garvey's expression darkened. He nodded and said, "That's right, the Volunteer Army. It's just, maybe this is a thing of the past." In fact, Chinhuyan's first impression of Preston was very good. In fact, there is a saying in Buddhism that love comes from the heart. Chinhuyan believed in this sentence very much. A person's character can be seen through his facial features. As for the black man in front of him, whether it's the way he speaks or the firm look in his eyes, it shows that he is a very upright person. And most importantly, looking in from the door, you can find that there are several women and old ladies in the room, and they are willing to cross the Federation with such burdens, which is also very explainable. After coming to the world of Fallout 4, he met scumbags like Casper, Marauder, and Gresto, as well as good people like Knight, Old Hardy, and Old Gracie. Now he is indeed full of interest in this organization that calls itself the Volunteer Army. So he walked over to find a place to sit down, and then said something that made him feel depressed in the future, although he couldn't say it was regrettable. "Tell me about your volunteer army, what kind of people are you?" Knight also came over and sat down. "I'm also quite interested. I don't know anything about the current status of the Federation." Preston nodded and said, "The Minuteman Note 1 is a relatively loose militia organization. Our purpose is to provide assistance to the residents of the Federation, any residents. We once occupied the castle as our stronghold, set up a high-power radio transmission tower to allow homeless residents from all over the Federation to settle in the castle. Not only that, no matter where the residents need help, our volunteer army will be obliged to help. Minute, man, means this, we are on call." Chinhuyan was slightly moved. If the volunteer army is really what he said, then it is indeed an admirable organization. In such a doomsday wasteland, who can guarantee that he can truly sacrifice himself for others? Then why are you being chased by such a group of predators? Knight asked. Because we're the last remaining members of the Zouaves, Preston sighed. After the Quincy massacre, the Zouaves lost their faith and fell apart. Quincy massacre? Chinhuyan asked with a frown. Yes, the Quincy massacre. Preston lowered his head. A month ago, Murphy's mother predicted that the gunmen would attack Quincy town, so the volunteer army was invited to defend the town. The gunmen attacked every day. Continuing, but our troops are seriously short, and our companions die every day. We sent a signal for help to several volunteer troops around us, but in the end, more gunmen came. Finally, Quincy town was broken. Out of the thousands of residents in the entire town, only 19 survived. Over 1,000 residents, only 19 survived? Chinhuyan and Knight's eyes were filled with anger. In Chinhuyan's heart, the gunman organization had been completely blacklisted. Chinhuyan took a deep breath, calmed down, and said, and the volunteer army is on this matter. Since you claim to be on call, you are willing to help every resident of the Federation. But Quincy town was besieged by gunmen, and the surrounding area a few volunteer armies choose to stand on the sidelines, then the foundation of the volunteer army's existence has been destroyed. That's right, the volunteer army has been disbanded, but we still have faith. Preston's eyes became firm. As long as there is one person in the Federation who is willing to help others, the spirit of the volunteer army will exist. The volunteer army will exist. However, Chinhuyan poured cold water on it. This is not enough. You must know that you don't even have the strength to protect these women and old ladies from predators. If we don't do it because things are difficult, then we don't deserve to be called volunteers. Preston said solemnly, even if you didn't come over, those predators would never want to hurt Mr. Murphy before I fell. Mother them. Well, what are your plans? Chinhuyan asked. He could see that Preston was not lying, and respect for him spontaneously arose in his heart. Actually, we are going to protect the hills. There used to be a residential area there, but it has been deserted for many years. We plan to go there to settle down first, and then gradually expand our power. Start with the surrounding. Some villages started, we provided them with protection, and also allowed these villages to join the volunteer army, bringing us more fresh forces. Preston replied. Well, it turns out that you are eyeing my hometown. Knight said with a self-deprecating smile. My hometown? I'm sorry, I don't quite understand. Preston said apologetically. Knight waved his hand and said, it doesn't matter, it's just a small matter. Now I happen to live in Sanctuary Hills, where there are only me and the machine butler Caswell. There are still many vacant rooms, and it is a good thing that you can go there. Preston bowed his head slightly and said, okay, thank you for helping us who are homeless. The volunteer army will always owe you a favor, and you, Mr. Chinhuyan, Miss Yi. Since you have agreed, let's go there without delay. There are many ghouls here in Concord, and there are often predators. We'd better not stay too long. By the way, Knight, the one in your power armor, how much energy is left in the nuclear fusion core? A man with a curly hair came over. There are still about 7%. Knight answered truthfully. Well, at least on this journey, our safety depends entirely on it. Before the energy is exhausted, let's go as soon as possible. Otherwise, it would be bad if this power armor fell into the hands of predators. Big Back said. Actually, I think our safety should depend on Mr. Chinhuyan and Miss Yi. I think they are more powerful than power armor. Knight pointed to Chinhuyan and said. His name is Sturgis, and he is our mechanic. Preston said, then, can I ask you to help us go to the shelter hill? Although we don't have many materials in our hands, I will try my best to reward you. Note 1, during the American War of Independence, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts established a militia organization called Minuteman, and the volunteers here are obviously paying tribute to them. In fact, Fallout 4 pays homage to the War of Independence everywhere. Thank you that he is not married yet. I want to wait. Book friend 201812309114190025, Zingai Ranger rewarded 1000 starting coins. Thank you Tease fans for the reward of 100 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 279. 277 Shelter Hill. We are dead, we are all dead, a man who looked very haggard muttered to himself in a crying voice. It's okay, June Long, we're safe, it's okay. Sturgis walked over and patted the man on the shoulder, and said softly. At this time, Chunyuan was very interested in the gun in Preston's hand. It was a long gun, and the trigger was an energy generator similar to the laser pistol he had seized before, but there was an iron stick extending out from the front of the gun. A focuser is tied to the stick, and a red electric light connects the focuser and the energy generator. Interestingly, the bolt position of this gun is actually a crank. What kind of gun is this? Chunyuan asked with great interest. Laser Mausers are the standard equipment of the volunteer army. We added an energy focuser in front of the laser gun, which can further prevent the spread of the laser beam, so that it can hit very far targets. We insist on using this equipment instead of machine guns and so on, just to prevent the accidental injury of civilians during the battle. Preston replied. Chunyuan nodded, but now is not the time to come and scan. At least so far, he hasn't seen that gun better than his own M4101 pulse rifle. The interest in laser guns is more to enrich the equipment database of the Infinite Base. It's not too late, let's go. Knight urged. Along the way, Knight drove the T-45 a power armor to open the way in front. Preston Garvey followed closely behind, Sturgis and Walter were in the middle to protect, and Chunyuan and Yi were behind. However, they didn't encounter too many difficulties. Apart from encountering some mutated mole rats and half-meter-long mutated cockroaches on the road, they arrived at the shelter hill very safely. It was already the next morning when we got here. The entrance to Sanctuary Hills is a rickety wooden bridge with a statue of a Revolutionary War militiaman at the head of the bridge. After they crossed the wooden bridge, they came to a residential area. Most of the buildings in this residential area have collapsed into ruins, but the beauty and elegance before being destroyed can still be seen. Compared with the apartment buildings in Concord, the family conditions of the people who can live here should be very good. Not long after they entered the residential area, they heard an electronically synthesized male voice, "Master, you are finally back. Did you go to Concord without any injuries?" Soon, a machine with a very strange shape flew over. This machine has a spherical body with a diameter of about 1 meter. In each of the 3 directions on the body, there is an electronic eye that looks like an old-fashioned car light. The electronic eye also has a direction adjuster, which can observe from different angles. Below the sphere are 3 very flexible mechanical tentacles, and its action depends on a jet engine at the bottom. As for why the jet engine can hover so smoothly at a height of about 1.5 meters above the ground, Chunyuan can only think that this is black technology. Yes, although there were some dangers, I came back safely. Moreover, I also made many new friends. Knight said, and introduced the robot to everyone. This is Kazuo Er, was my butler 200 years ago. It's nice to meet you all. Oh. I'm so happy to see Sanctuary Hills lively again. Although I don't know what it feels like to be happy, I know this is what I should be feeling now. The machine butler Kazver said. Chunyuan could indeed hear the obvious excitement from its tone. This is completely an intelligent AI. He walked over, pretending to be a curious baby, and asked, Kazwer. Hello, my name is Chunyuyan. I have never seen a robot like you. Can I touch you? It's absolutely fine, Mr. Chunyuyan. Although it has been 200 years, I still maintain myself regularly. I have completely removed the radioactive dust from my body 96 years ago. You can touch it with confidence, sir. Kazwer said. Chunyuyan stretched out his hand and put it on Kazwell's body. The steel body was slightly hot, which was the heat generated after the jet engine was continuously turned on. He began to read the scan in his mind, but the feedback the system gave him was disappointing. The subject of the scan has a rudimentary artificial intelligence with independent personality. The scan takes 30 minutes, and the subject's personality cannot be entered into the database. Unable to scan, there are other people around who do not belong to your camp. It seems that there is no way to scan it now, and artificial intelligence with independent personality can't scan the independent personality. This restriction does not matter. Hope this touch satisfies you, sir. Caswell's voice came. Chunyuyan let go of his hand and said with a smile, it's amazing that such a convenient robot exists. Thank you for your compliment, sir. Caswell seemed delighted. At this time, Preston had turned around in the sheltered hills and came back. He said, this place is perfect. There is only one bridge in the direction of Concord and Boston. It is easy to defend and difficult to attack. It is surrounded by Concord. Surrounded by the river, with a hill behind us. We can build up a solid line of defense with very few hands, and with the river passing through, life is not a problem. The mountain behind is the number 111 refuge where I was frozen and hibernated before, and there is really nothing worth caring about other than that, Knight said. Refuge? The underground one? Preston shook his head and expressed no interest. The goal of our volunteer army is to establish a brand new and harmonious civilization in the Federation, not to hide underground. But there may be used as a warehouse. Knight nodded and said, there is really nothing worth paying attention to in Shelter 111, mainly just some freezers. I looked for it before I came out, and there is nothing particularly useful. Although Chunyuyan really wanted to go to the refuge, but when he heard what Knight said, he immediately lost interest. He said, since this is a good settlement, you should settle down first. Walter and I are going back to Ten Pine Village. Thank you again for everything you have done, Mr. Chunyuyan, Miss Yi. These are some of the rewards I can offer. I hope you don't think too little, because it is really not much. Preston emptied his pocket, touched dozens of bottle caps and handed them to Chunyuyan. I don't really need the bottle cap, but it would be best if you have a treatment needle. Chunyuyan returned the bottle cap to Preston. As for the treatment needles, I have some here. Among the civilians was a timid woman. She took out 3 treatment needles and gave them to Chunyuyan. Along the way, Chunyuyan also knew her name, Marcy Long, the wife of June Long. After receiving the treatment needle, Chunyuyan scanned it into the Infinite Base database. Preston came over and took out a walkie-talkie and a flare gun and said, this walkie-talkie can receive the unique communication channel of the volunteer army, with a range of about 10 kilometers, and this flare gun is also dedicated to the volunteer army. Seeing this special, the volunteers around will come to help. Although I am the only one in the volunteer army now, I believe that the volunteer army will become stronger again. Chunyuyan nodded with a smile and said, okay, if this is the case, I will also bring back the news of the reconstruction of the volunteer army to Shizongzhuang. From now on, Shizongzhuang and Sanctuary Hill will help each other and advance and retreat together. Thank you. Preston shook hands with Chunyuyan again. Over there, Sturgis was already busy, and he said to Nate, we need to clear out some usable things here, beds and so on. You are more familiar with this place, hope you can do us a favor. Also, we are short of manpower, we need to build some automatic machine guns for defense, and we need to find some materials. Knight is an honest man, he does what he says, and immediately gets busy. It's really a place full of vitality. Chen Yuyan said with emotion. Here he really saw something different from the lifeless Shizong Zhuang. Although the busiest one is only Knight. May I invite you to join the volunteer army? Mr. Chen Yuyan. Preston asked. For the time being, no. Chen Yuyan shook his head. He understood that his own way of doing things was somewhat incompatible with these very idealistic people. It's okay to help, but if you join, sooner or later there will be trouble. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 280. 278, The Upheaval of Shizong Zhuang. On the way back, Yi suddenly said to Chen Yuyan, "Sitg, the color is different from the others." Chen Yuyan was a little surprised. "Color, what do you mean?" "Detecting life, Uncle Linhuo taught me a level 1 magic. I used it by accident in Sanctuary Hill just now, and found that everyone else has a red feeling, but Sturgis has a blue feeling." Yi replied. Chen Yuyan stopped suddenly. "Wait a minute, could it be that Sturgis is a synthetic human? It doesn't make sense. Although he seems a little glib, he is still very sincere. I have seen him comfort that man more than once." Already terrified Jun Long. "I don't know if it's a synthetic human, but Sturgis has a different color," Yi said. As soon as he heard the synth, Walter jumped up. "What did you say? Are there real synths?" "Don't worry about it, let's go back as soon as possible." Chen Yuyan patted a bag made of torn clothes on his back, which was full of weapons and ammunition picked up from the looters. Chen Yuyan picked up relatively good weapons, such as laser pistols and the like. "If you go back and give these weapons to the villagers of Shizong Zhuang, the security of this village will be improved a lot." Walter also emptied his knapsack, and all the mole meat in it was given to Preston and the others. In his backpack is now full of all sorts of useful junk, which he says would sell for at least 500 caps anyway. As for the meat that improves life, as long as they have the weapons that Chen Yuyan brought back, it's not a problem, they can go out and hunt moles. Now that he got the needles and returned with a rewarding experience, Walter is in a great mood. He now also knows that such a big harvest is entirely due to the existence of Chen Yuyan and Yi. In his eyes, now Chen Yuyan is like an omnipotent god. However, when they came to the vicinity of Shizong Zhuang, they suddenly found black smoke billowing from the direction of the village. "Oh no! It's a village!" Walter screamed, and ran towards the village with the scorpion rifle Chen Yuyan gave him. Chen Yuyan grabbed Walter, dragged him to a nearby mountain with sparse trees, and said in a deep voice, "Calm down. Don't take the road." Walter had completely lost his backbone, and when he heard what Chen Yuyan said, he subconsciously nodded in agreement, and followed him in despair. They advanced quickly in the mountains, and Chen Yuyan and Yi's speed was very fast, almost completely unaffected by the terrain. But Walter couldn't do it. Although he was tall and burly, he couldn't take it no matter what he did. Seeing Walter panting, Yi walked over and snatched the backpack from him and carried it on his body. Walter's eyes were moved when he saw Yi, who was like a goddess, helping him carry his backpack. Running towards the village, they looked around for a while, only to find that several houses in the village were already on fire, and the billowing smoke came from here. The rest of the village is also in a mess. The villagers' family things, furniture, and so on are all over the floor. Several women were kneeling on the ground crying bitterly. Seeing this, Walter quickly ran over, hugged one of the women and asked loudly, "Mom! What happened? Why did it happen? Who did it?" The woman cried, "It's Casper the bastard. He brought a bunch of looters and ransacked the village. He burned our house and Gracie's house. And he, give Gracie to Gracie. What's wrong with Gracie?" Chen Yuyan asked as he came out from behind. "You You dare to come back. It's all your fault. It's all your fault. That's why we became like this. Another villager next to him pointed at Chun Yuyan and said loudly. Jones, shut up. Another villager shouted in a low voice. Hearing the shouts from here, many villagers also came out of the houses and looked at Chun Yuyan and the others. Grassy's old couple were taken away by them. Casper also said that if you want to save Grassy's life, you and that girl should take off your clothes and kowtow at the gate of the Wuxia assembly factory. Otherwise, they will give up. Every week they will come and burn a house until they plow Shizongzhuang to the ground. Walter's mother cried. Chun Yuyan sneered, looked around, looked at the expressions of the villagers, and said slowly, so, do you want Yi and I to take off our clothes and kneel in front of Casper, begging for his forgiveness? Haha, if that's the case. With a bang, he dropped the bag behind his back on the ground, revealing more than a dozen various firearms, and one by one also dropped Walter's backpack on the ground. Then I'll take my leave. Let's go, Yi. Chun Yuyan greeted, and walked out of the village without looking back. Wait a minute, please. A voice suddenly shouted from behind. Chun Yuyan turned his head and saw an old man walking out. It was one of the old men who discussed with Grassy when Casper was expelled. We've never thought about it that way, Mr. Yan. The old man said. Jones' words just now were a moment of anger, and they don't represent what we mean. It's impossible for us to negotiate terms with the predators, they have no humanity at all. Then what are you going to do? Chun Yuyan asked flatly. The old man shook his head and said, we misunderstood Casper before, he is a hopeless scum. He actually mixed up with the predators. He should have been killed at that time, but after all, he is in our we can't bear the children of the village elders. What about now? Chun Yuyan continued to ask. We will never compromise. We have seen too much of what the predators have done. They will only go one step further, squeeze out our remaining value, and then kill us without hesitation. The old man said angrily, although I don't know if it can be done, we are going to notify the volunteer army, hoping that they can come to help us. Moreover, I also hope that you can stay these few days. When Casper comes over next time, we will have more power defense. Chun Yuyan's expression changed. Volunteer army? You notified the volunteer army? How did you notify? I can only hope that there will be a caravan passing by these days. We don't have a radio here. I don't know when we can pass the news. But they said they will come back in a week, and we still have time. The old man said. But I heard that the volunteer army has been disbanded. Chun Yuyan asked. There are such rumors, and I don't know if it's true. But if even the volunteer army is disbanded, we really don't know who can help us, the old man sighed, his expression darkened. Chun Yuyan smiled, took out the flare gun and walkie-talkie given to him by Preston Garvey, and handed it to the old man, saying, the volunteer army is still there, but their strength nearby is relatively weak. You should know one thing, the volunteer army will to continue to exist, then each of us must be a volunteer army. You mean, the old man took the things in surprise. That's right, if you help others, someone will help you. Join the volunteer army, and then the volunteer army will come to help you. Chun Yuyan said earnestly. These things. Could it be that you, the old man looked up at Chun Yuyan. That's right, you can think of me as a volunteer army. Chun Yuyan smiled. Hearing what the old man said, he already had an intuitive judgment on the status of the volunteer army in the hearts of the people, so he also made up his mind. The slogan of the volunteer army that Preston said before is indeed not empty words. They are really carrying out their actions to help every resident of the Federation to the end. Therefore, when encountering attacks and difficulties, the villagers of Shizongzhuang will think of the volunteer army immediately. It was precisely because of the existence of hope that they did not insensitively spread their anger on Chun Yuyan, but wanted to resolutely resist to the end. You, really? The old man came over and held Chen Yuyan's hand, his body trembling with excitement. Chen Yuyan patted him on the shoulder and said, Walter stayed here, and we brought a lot of weapons and ammunition. You build fortifications as much as possible. Call for help through this walkie-talkie, and the volunteers in the sheltered hills will come to help. As for the marauders at the Casper and Corvega assembly plants, there was a bloodthirsty smile on the corner of his mouth. I think they won't be able to see the sun tomorrow. I'm going to Zigong for a business trip in the afternoon, so there are probably only 2 updates in these 2 days.